All right, so in this session, then we have Ash Mahay. He's going to be speaking about introducing the IBM Z Service Management Explorer on Zoe. If you have any questions, if you could pop them into the chat. If there's an appropriate moment, I can ask those questions to Ash. And then at the end, if there are any more questions, I can unmute you all and we can have a discussion if required. Okay, Ash, over to you.
Right, one final check. You can hear me still, hey, Anna?
I can still hear you. Thank you.
Excellent. Right, hi there. My name's Ash Mahay, and I'm one of the IBM offering managers for the Amiga Mon portfolio, the IBM Z Monitoring suites and offerings. So today we're going to talk about the IBM Z Service Management Explorer, which runs on Zoe, and so we'll go into that in more detail. And so the agenda here is we'll just quickly introduce IBM Z Monitoring, what it's about, and then we'll have an overview of the IBM Z Service Management Explorer itself, and then we'll go into the architecture, how it's deployed, what the requirements, the authentication modes, how do you log on to the user interface, and what we're doing in the future for continuous delivery, and how you can get support. And I've left an option at the end for Q&A. As Anna said, do please add them to the chat box, and if at the appropriate time, just stop me. So on that note, so here we go. Excuse me, I've got a bit of a cough, but hopefully it's all good. Right, so IBM Z Monitoring. Now, if you look at IBM Z Monitoring, it's a tool that brings operations and teams together to monitor operations and performance of the actual Z mainframe. It looks you can get alerted when issues arise and quickly take actions to prevent serious performance issues or outages. It supports not only operators but also various domain experts like subsystems, databases, storage, networks, and so forth. So it's a full-rounded monitoring option or offering that is available. It offers all the key subsystems as mentioned. So you've got the ZOS-based operating system itself, but also the Z hardware. So the Z series hardware, you look at the databases, as you can see, there's maybe DB2, IMS, you got transaction processing, Kix IMS again, messaging, so you got MQ, networking, and many application platforms such as WebSphere, Liberty, and even key APIs that run in ZOS Connect. It covers also your storage. Now, quite often people may forget that there's also not just disk or tape, but there's like FICON, also the actual subsystems like DFS, our HSM and RMM, even CA tape management. These are all covered with the Z monitoring portfolio. It also features intelligent alerts, as I mentioned earlier, spanning multiple subsystems. So if we're looking at distributed also, as well as mainframe, to find problems, performance availability before they impact service levels and cause Twitter storms. That's what you're trying to avoid. And if you do monitor Twitter, and so your customers are also not impacted. Now, this is really critical since too many alerts can overwhelm operators and raise the risk of missing or ignoring real issues as they emerge. It's also important to provide the right information and arrange in the right ways, at the right times, for the right audiences, of course. So high-level management views and reports purpose-built out-of-the-box dashboards enable IT operators or operations to quickly identify, isolate, analyze, and diagnose problems twice as fast. So to provide the true operational resiliency for hybrid cloud operations or environments, IBM Z Monitoring also incorporates management views, including distributed platforms, resources that underpin the hybrid cloud operations through the enterprise portal. This allows management operations as well and domain experts to have a full 360-degree view of the environment and breaking down those silos, as you say. The objective is to avoid war rooms and finger pointing while quickly getting to the root cause of the issues before they affect applications. Of course, You've got the domain experts, so they would require still with the deep dive 3270 screens that support common tasks, situations situated to their roles. So you can quickly isolate and actually resolve with take actions and even take tracing and so on. So if you look at the user interfaces, I'm going to break this down. There's now, although we're talking about IBM Z Service Manager Explorer, but we do have Service Management Unite, which is a single set of domain visualizations that come into one user interface, and it includes multiple tools or unites multiple tools in one user interface. So you've got the monitoring, which provides the IBM Amigamon family of offerings. So you can see the Amigamon data within the Service Management Unite. You also have automation that's provided through the system automation toolset. And you also have access to NetView commands. And you can actually visualize it or CANS log. You can issue commands to NetView through the Service Management Unite. It is but before I say Zoe based, but it's you also get scheduling access as well. So you got an IBM workload scheduler, so you can look at distributed jobs as well as Z jobs that running in your enterprise. Now, Service Management Unite runs on Z Linux, but it actually also now provides support for Docker containers. You can implement SMU through a Docker container, and you can actually run that natively on the ZOS itself with the Z container extensions. So SMU is available in multiple forms, and so depending how you want, if you've got access to distributed server, excellent. But we do have customers who require native ZOS offerings, so therefore ZCX and Dockerization was provided towards the end of last year, I believe. So that's Service Management Unite. Now, if you'd like to learn more about this, I've not done it any justice, to be honest. If you take a note of this, on Tuesday next week, my colleague Wolfgang will be presenting SMU in more details. You can see the different domains, what's covered, which, for example, waters. If you can look at system automation tasks, are they up or down? Policies. You can look at scheduled jobs. You can actually do planning or forecasting. Look at the operational views with the alerts, and you can look at the domain workspaces that provided or dashboards that's provided SMU. Those will be providing more detail in the session next week with Wolfgang. So now, the prime objective here is to bridge the skills gap. As Service Manager, as I mentioned, Service Manager Unite provides at a glance access to multiple service management domains. Because of the simple but powerful user experience provided by SMU, new to Z or new to IBM Z staff can learn how to do their jobs more quickly. So to help bridge the skills gap created by the generational shift, because we're seeing more and more younger staff coming on board to the Z, and which is, as older SMEs are retiring, we've got this generational shift. So we have to ensure that they have tools that they can easily adopt and take on without much effort. So this is the whole point of graphical user interface, the SMU uniting that brings all the disciplines together. So Z IT operators can do everything or quite a lot of the remediation, maybe even remediation, but at least detection and isolation through a user interface. But then you have the IBM Z Service Management Explorer. This is how this now brings in the monitoring data. Now, the domain experts need much more deep analysis of the system health metrics events than operators. So not only they can quickly identify and correct problems, but also be able to isolate or understand quickly the dynamics of the various workloads that are transversing on Z as well. So IBM Z Service Management Explorer is a modern graphical user interface designed to make it easier for newer domain experts. Key features like flyover help and expert advice make IBM Z SME. Now I'll use SME because it's a lot easier, but it'll be IBM Z SME from now on, right? Not subject matter expert. So IBM Z SME gives a user experience to the newer staff or the new trainee Z experts on mainframe. Both UIs are fed with the IBM Z monitoring tools, are fed by the Amigamon data, and so you still get the single version of truth as mentioned here. So let's look at the IBM Z SME in more detail. So the objective of IBM Z SME or Service Manager Explorer was to modernize the Amigamon web user interface. We introduced it in May this year. It's actually our role to replace the TEP. Now, you may all have experience with the Tivoli Enterprise Portal, and so there are some issues with regarding needing the end user Java. So what would the objective here is to put the TEP UI type functions into all web ZOS based user interface. So we'll go into more details what that means, but for version 1 we have a read only capability, so any TEP workspaces you've customized in the UI in TEP UI will be also available automatically in the IZSME, and I'll show you an example of that. Excuse me. The objective here is to, like I said earlier, removing the end user Java on your desktop. That's been a big pain point for customers. So now with IBM Z SME, you do not need to have Java on your desktop, which is a thumbs up there from our customers. So we also provide you support to Zowe and Node.js. Now, you may be aware of Zowe or Node. Now these run on mainframe. Now you can get Zowe from the Open Mainframe project, which is a Linux Foundation. But if you want IBM to support it, you pay SNS or Service and Stream. But if you use IZSME, you will get support for Zowe, and I'll mention how that works later on in the slides. So our next steps are to introduce event management into IZSME and take actions and so on. So we're on a multi-step approach. First phase is, like I said, a read-only capability, and then we'll expand that out. So as I mentioned earlier, we announced it in May. These are links. I don't think I've uploaded the slides or PDF into the GSE website, but you should be able to download that and use the links. Well, we introduced it. It's part of IBM Tivoli Management Services, version 6.3.1, and this IZSME is part of that delivery. It's a $0 PID, so you can download it and use that straight away or implement it straight away. So at a glance, it's IBM's next-gen graphical user interface. Our statement of direction was to replace, or is to replace, the Tivoli Enterprise Portal for IBM Z. It runs in a Zowe browser, so you can log on using your TSO RACF user ID, or if you want LDAP enabled, you can do that, and I'll show that later on. And the objective here is to ensure that you don't have to have the Java desktop client. So you don't need the end user Java client, and you do not need to actually configure it through PalmGen, even for updates or migration, which is another plus for customers. Okay, so it's easy to deploy and familiar to use. So as it's a TEP, it's basically the TEP in a Zowe browser. I mean, you connect easily to the TEPs and your TEMs, and I'll show you the configurations. The navigation is very similar as you have in a TEP. So you have your navigator views, you have your workspaces and linking, and etc. But it's a modern look and feel. And there's some good features such as filtering, and I'll mention those in a little while. You inherit all your customizations. If you created multiple dashboards and multiple workspaces, they will be automatically be available in IZSME. So situations as well, navigators, all of those will be available, and you'll see how that happens because of the architecture. You also have the ITM agents, ITM v6 agents, that are distributed agents that will be connected to or available in IZSME as well for your purpose. Now, I mean, you still get the Amigamon, so the Amigamon monitors, you'll see the dashboards that come with Amigamon in IZSME, but if you have distributed agents connected also to your hub TEMs, you will also see that visualization in a navigator as well. So distributed is also covered. Also, other tools like advanced storage tools, those are also available in IZSME. So the idea is all of the old and all of the new. So the migration should be as seamless as possible. That's the objective here with IZSME. It's a carbon look and feel. We're using the IBM carbon design platform. And so you'll see some subtle differences between the TEP and IZSME. The objective is improving the user experience, as mentioned here. We do provide also multi-factor authentication and passphrase support. Now that was something that customers asked for in the TEP user interface. With the browser, with IZSME, you get that. We support currently compound in-band multi-factor authentication, and then as Zoe is developed further, hopefully it will add other options and we can take advantage of that. We take advantage of the security layer on Zoe platform. Filtering, so this is something new that was introduced with moving to Zoe. We were able to do more advanced changes, such as now filtering. Many of you may not be aware that if you do filtering, if you do a sort on a table, you only sort the view that's visual at that time. So it's probably your table might have 100 rows. You only sort the first 100 rows. Now with IZSME, the sorting is done at the server level, so it will sort all of the data that's on the server, and then return the top 100 rows. So therefore you get a real sort in your table view, and filtering works similar fashion. So as a quick UI comparison, you have, so on the TEP, there are two modes of viewing the data. So there's a thin client, which is that runs in a browser. It's actually an applet and requires JRE desktop and also a browser plugin. Java browser plugin, and you've got the desktop client. If you have Java Web Start, you can launch TEP on your desktop as well. And unfortunately, it does mean that you do require Java on your desktop, and that's a pain point for some customers. And it's something that we've addressed. So core features, as I mentioned, most products that come out of the box, even if you create your own agents, you can see though it's predefined. You get your predefined workspaces, navigators, workspaces, queries, etc. All of those are available in the TEP. That's what is provided out of the box. Highly customizable dashboards. You can create and modify navigators and so on, policies, workflow policies, and so on. It's quite a lot of stuff that we provide out of the box with our agents, Amiga One agents and distributed agents as well. You can manage the user access. Of course, that's so which users are allowed to view certain domains, and you can authenticate through the OS. So if you're running the hub TEMS on your Z Linux or even your ZOS, you can have RACF, or you can have OS level authentication or LDAP. On the IZ Service Management Explorer side, so now we've moved to an HTML5 based user interface presentation of the TEP, which requires no Java because it's a plugin within the Zoe browser. And so that's the key differentiator here. So you launch your browser and you can log on that way. Similarities, so it's still similar to the TEP. You still have the same navigation layout. It's still the same data that's displayed in your workspaces. It supports custom navigators, custom workspaces, but so therefore there's no migration required. So if you create a custom workspace or have created a custom workspace in the TEP, it's migrated automatically. You refresh the screen, the changes are there straight away. Honest TEP authorizations to navigators, because the authorizations are kept and stored in the TEPS database, so that's still valid even with IZSME. The differences, as I mentioned, there's server-side column sorting now, so you sort the whole data field rather than just the first 100 lines that are viewed in the table, for example. Even with filtering, the filtering you sort at the server side. Again, it's filtered on the whole data. So if you want to see the last, you want to see transactions, transaction A, and you want to see 300 of them. You sort them by over if it's more than 10 TPS, or even if the response times are greater than XYZ, you can sort the whole field, and then you can only then you can get the data, real data that represents that requirement, that filtering status. The plot charts cover longer time frames. Now, before, the plot charts only allowed 24 hours. We provide 96 hours now. So these are the kind of changes we can do as we're moving to IZSME. So you can go up to 96 hours. We don't currently provide administrative capabilities in the phase one, so therefore you can't edit user access in IZSME. You have to use a TEP interface for that still. So as we migrate over, these kind of functionalities hopefully will be moved over to IZSME quick enough. Okay. Shall I pause for questions, or are we okay there, Anna?
Sorry, I was also on mute.
Okay.
There's no questions come up
Okay.
in the
Cool.
chat at this point.
Excellent. So we'll go into the architecture. So as I mentioned earlier, you require Zowe. It's the Zowe plugin. IZSME runs on the Zowe framework. So you need a browser-based web top, desktop even, but Zowe comes with multiple options. So you have a browser web desktop, you get an API mediation layer, which is your API catalog, and you also have your Node.js command base CLI, so you can actually run commands remotely, in fact, into the mainframe. So you can edit data sets, you can look at file systems in the USS and so on. So this is how you get into the mainframe using a open framework with Zowe. It's like I said, it's on the Linux Foundation. It's a project on the Linux Foundation and the Open Framework project. Okay. Again, there was a presentation this morning. Of course, I haven't done much justice. So if you would like to go back and have the replay, there was a session this morning, session 6AA, modernizing the mainframe, and that covers the Zowe in more detail. Okay, so going back to IZSME, the architecture. So if you look to the left first, you got the TEP, you got the TEPS instance, the standard ITM framework, you got the TEMRs, distributed TEMRs, and then if you have the AmigaMon TEMRs, they sit on the Z. There's a Hub TEMS, and you have a Tivoli Data Warehouse. So that's the standard default ITM framework we have today. You have, of course, you need the Java for the TEP client. But if you look on the right-hand side now, and the green boxes represent Zowe itself. So you have the Zowe desktop, you got a Node server, and you got the ZSS server. Now, all three of these are available through the Zowe and are required. But then we provide the installation to provide for the IZSME plugin and the IZSME code. So you see here there's a requirement to have a TEPS adapter that connects directly to the TEPS database, and that's because you need to have the need to know which users are defined, where the workspaces are, what the workspaces definitions are, the presentation layer. So the TEPS adapter will get the information from the TEPS database. It also connects to the hub, so where you can get the data from the agents, and also you can get the SDA, so was that self-describing agent information. So when you have new agents coming online, maintenance is applied, the IBM Z SME will be updated with the latest platform or latest updates that come with these fixed packs or PTFs. Okay, so this is the general flow. So if you look at IZSME at the top, it runs in the browser. Then you have the REST server that's created in the Node server itself, and then you have the IZSME plugin that's in the ZSS server. These all run on ZOS, and currently you can. I was going to jump two screens, but there are options available now, or rather we're working on. There's a beta that's open. As you can see here, there's a Zowe and SME running on a Z Linux with a Docker container. So if you are interested in running IZSME on Z Linux in Docker, let us know, let me know in fact, and I can put you in contact with the right people. We're looking for users or customers who would like to try this out. So with this, if you look at this architecture, it's on ZOS only, but hopefully in the future, soon in the future, you'll see availability of Zowe on Z Linux through a Docker container. And that therefore you'll have IZSME availability as well. Okay, requirements. What are the requirements? As I mentioned earlier, you do need Zowe. Requires Zowe 1.1 or above. You need these PTFs at least. You need to download the Zowe. You can download it from the Linux Foundation itself, or you can download it from IBM. Now, IBM Z distribution of Zowe is available, and there's a link here, and you can, and that takes you to the IBM Knowledge Center, where it tells, which shows you how you can download this package. It's available through Shop Z, I believe, if I recall correctly. You need Node.js. Again, it's part of the Zowe, so you should be able to get hold of that. The database that are supported with IZSME is DB2. Now, what does that mean? That means the TEPS database has to be a standalone DB2 instance. It doesn't support native, Derby. So if you've installed the TEPS and used the Derby database, IZSME does not connect to that Derby database. So you do need to ensure that the DB2 instance or the TEPS is running in its own DB2 instance. Okay. Java, you do need Java on Z and version 8 or later. And I think most outbars or most Z systems have Java nowadays. And the browsers that are supported, you got Chrome, Mozilla, and Microsoft Edge. Okay. So installation and configuration. I've said it's a piece of cake. Well, I've shown it's a piece of cake, but actually it is quite simple. Installation, you can just download the FMID. You do not need to download the Tivoli Management Services on Z entirely. You can just do just download that FMID. And once you've installed that, there's post-install jobs. So as I mentioned earlier, there's no PalmGen requirements. As you know, to configure the AmigaMons, you require PalmGen. For now, there's another session later on in the week. We'll talk about a different type of PalmGen or replacement for PalmGen, but that's on Thursday. You unpacks, so you unpack the files that come with the FMID, and then you install it into the Zowe instance. Then there's some post configuration as well. So that's those are the steps. So to install, you like I said, you unpacks the file into a directory, simple enough, and then you set you go to the directory where the scripts available. You need to export some variables, as mentioned, as seen here at the bottom screen. These are needed for the script. So when you set these variables, you run the script. So the Zowe install IZSME script. You need to pass the Zowe install directory, so where Zowe is installed, and you also need to pass the location of the IZSME install. So as you see at the top, that command, you run that command, and actually, literally, I've seen it in action. You can install it within a minute. It may be 2 minutes at most. So this installation is very quick. And once that's installed, there's some post configuration steps that are required. But as a word of a note, you need to run the script with write permissions. So the user that's running this install should have write permissions. And also the address space must have read access. So it's better to change the owner to the Zowe when done. So the Zowe user should have access to the IZSME install directory as well. Okay. Post installation steps. So you will need to edit some of the Zowe instance files, or actually one of them. If you look at edit the instance.env file, we disable the clustering. We don't use that with IZSME, so you disable that. But also you need to disable, or not need to, but it's worthwhile disabling the gateway, because we do not use the gateway for IZSME either, which actually helps with performance as well. So here you say you just enable the desktop, and then you restart the Zowe, and in theory, you should have the IZSME plugin displayed on the Zowe as a Zowe app. Now, there's a note here as well. When creating the Zowe key store, set it to false. We don't use the API mediation layer, so set that to false. Otherwise, the API mediation layer starts to interrogate ZOSMF, and we don't need it. So disable that as well. Okay, so when you've actually got the plugin installed, there are some configuration requirements so you can connect to the TEPS. So you log onto the browser as a first-time user, you open the TEPS connection, or rather you configure a TEPS connection, and then you can set the authentication mode. So if it's through LDAP, or is it through TEPS, or is it the OS, or is it RACF? So here we go, some screenshots. You launch the Zowe browser. You log on using your TSO RACF user ID. So you need to ensure that you've got that defined on your ZOS system, of course, where Zowe is running. And then once you've logged on, you go to the start menu. You should see the plugin, your IZSME listed as an app. So you launch that. And then because it's the first time you've installed IZSME, you need to configure the TEPS connection. So you click on the settings icon, and in there you say, right, I want to add new, and add new. So you point to the hub TEMS, you give the port details, and then you scroll down and then you enter the TEPS details. And this is the TEPS directory, the TEPS server, and also the DB2 instance. So because as I mentioned earlier, IZSME requires access to the TEPS database. So you need to insert the DB2 database details as well. You have the option to test the connection, advisable of course. So you test the connection. If it's connected successfully, you're almost set. So once you've tested it, you saved, then you set the default configuration or that TEP to be the default connection for users, and you save that and you exit the dialog. So once you've exited that, so you should be able to now just select the TEP server that was available, that you've just inserted, put your username, and if you enable password, put the password, and you should get straight into the TEPS instance or the TEPS server, or rather the IZSME UI, which is similar to the TEPS as you can see here. So there you go, you just start navigating away. So that's how quickly IZSME is for you to get it up and running. It's straightforward, the steps are simple, and that's the objective here. And note, there's no Java required, and also this runs in a browser. It runs in your browser of choice, and you can actually bring it up on a phone as well if you needed to. Okay, so which authentication modes are available? And okay, so authorization is done through the TEPS database, as I mentioned earlier. You can authenticate and use the default option and say you want the desktop, the Zowe, to be your authentication mode, so which requires your TSO user ID and password where Zowe is running. Or you can configure the TEPS instance to authenticate through LDAP, and you need to ensure that effectively you've got the same as if you're using the TEP interface and you've got LDAP enabled for authentication. It's similar kind of setup as well in IZSME, so you need to ensure that you enable that as well. Good thing about IZSME, because it's the TEPS database, you've already got the details there, you already got the users defined there. Most of the work is done for you already, so you're just reusing what you've done in TEP or the TEPS instance. Or you can use the native TEPS. You can say that I don't want to authenticate with Zowe, and I don't want to authenticate with LDAP. As you do when you install ITM in first instance, whenever you install ITM, you normally do not enable authentication. So you could log on with sysadmin, and then you set up user IDs, and then you enable their authentication. Okay, so you can do, there's multiple ways of authenticating with IZSME, similar to the TEP, to be honest. So continuous delivery and support. So what do we want to do in the future? So currently we've said it's a read-only function. So we only provide you visualizations of the workspaces, situation console, event console, and so on. You can more or less do your operations tasks using IZSME, because you don't need to do you don't really need administration for that. We do have plans for supporting acknowledging situations and take actions. You can stop and start tasks if you want. Those will be coming in the future roadmap. Event details. So if you want to have a look more details about the situations, or you want to, like I said, acknowledge, but you want to add notes to it. These are planned for the future. And also extensions, so MQ special actions such as filtering, those aren't enabled. Storage toolkit linking into RDM, that's not enabled. And network agent workspace filtering, or if you want to do trace route and stuff like that, that's not enabled yet. But those are the roadmap items that we expect to put into action soon. So as a note again, we're seeking beta users for IZSME. If you want to run it in a Docker on Z Linux, please let me know, and I can put you in, like I said, put you in touch with the right people to get this up and running. Okay. So what about support? So as I said earlier, IZSME requires Zowe. It could be the Zowe that IBM distributes, or the IBM Z distribution for Zowe, which is what we've put down as a supporting program, or you can get the Zowe, which is on the open framework. Sorry, in the Linux Foundation open mainframe project. But you can, if you download the IBM Z distribution for Zowe, you will get support from IBM if you're using it purely for IBM Z service management at no additional charge. Okay, so you do not need to buy SNS for Zowe if you're using it for IZSME, and we will provide you the support if it's an IBM Z SME issue. Obviously you will get support for that, but if the underlying components like Zowe or Node is causing the IBM Z issue, we will route it to the right team and get the right support for that. But like we said, it's part only available for IBM Z SME. If the support is only available for IBM Z SME, you can of course purchase SNS if you want to use Zowe for other DevOps options and so on. That's available to you from the Shop Z as well still. But if you want some free support at no additional charge, as long as you're using it for IBM Z SME, you'll get that support. Okay, so almost at the end actually. So I've provided some links here to the Migamons and blogs and the newsletter. Do please register the newsletter. You do get monthly, quarterly notices of updates that we've provided, IZSME, but also Migamon, SMU, other tools, IMS, and so on. We provide that on a quarterly basis. So do register. There is a red paper Migamon for JVM. I mentioned that here, although we've not gone into much detail about Java monitoring or API monitoring. That's next week. We have a session there on Thursday. There is a Z trial, and I should mention this actually. There's a Z trial for SMUs. Like I said, I mentioned SMUs slightly earlier on in the presentation. SMU is available on Z trial, as is Migamon for JVM. So if you want to try for free, not install it locally, you just log on to an IBM hosted environment. It's provisioned for you for 3 days. So you have access to scenarios, labs. You can play until the 3 days are over. And if you want more time, you just re-register and you get another 3 days allocated to you to try the trial. So do give that a go. SMU's on there. There's going to be another one that's going to be added soon for SMU, and the Migamon JVM trial is being updated as we speak. So hopefully within the next couple of weeks or so, both SMU and Migamon for JVM will be updated with the latest offerings. Okay. So open mic, Anna.
Okay, so I have given you the power to unmute yourself. So if you have any questions for Ash, please feel free to speak now. Also, thank you, Ash, for the presentation and giving up your time to do this. And to everyone else, please make sure that in your bring your own agenda, you do click on to provide feedback for the session, so we know what's good about it. And yeah, any questions?
I'd just like to say again, if there are any people who would like to try it out, IZSME that is, so give me a shout, and if there's a betas running, the third time I'm saying this now, then you can have a go. Yeah, so you should be able to get it up and running quite quickly with a Docker container on Z Linux.
Okay, if there's any questions that you don't want to unmute yourself to ask, you can put them in the chat and I'll ask them on your behalf.
Alternatively, you reach out to me. My email's here at the top, at the bottom. You can reach out to me. That's ashok_mahay@uk.ibm.com.
Oh, that underscore is very secret.
I know. I better fix that.
I have one of those too. It's fine.
Oh yeah,
okay,
Ash. I'll jump in with the questions.
Hello,
Kev.
Kev.
I know. I thought I'd say hello as well. In another Zoe talk this morning, they were talking about Zoe in Linux and Docker and all that, and I can understand why that sort of makes sense. But as a ZOS person, if I'm actually building my monitoring on this new stuff, there's some advantages to actually having it on ZOS. I mean, if it's all zip enabled, it shouldn't cost me that much to run, and it reduces the number of things that could potentially fail between my browser and the mainframe. So a lot of this stuff, it seems to me, makes sense to run on ZOS as long as it doesn't cost too much.
Absolutely, Kev. Very nice to hear from you again. The node on ZOS is not zip enabled, so that's one thing to bear in mind. Yeah. So having it in a Docker container, and now I'm not saying this is going to happen, but you read between the lines if you wish. You have Z container extensions, right, on ZOS, and that's zip enabled, and so effectively it's a Z Linux image running in a started task on ZOS. So in theory, and I say in theory, you can run possibly Zoe and IZSME in a ZCX, hence being zip enabled. And so SMU itself is can run in a Z container extensions. And so therefore it takes full advantage of zip enabled. I think ZCX can run 98% zip enabled or something like that. I saw, please don't quote me on, but we're talking the high numbers here, 90 plus. So ZCX is probably an option I would see this where maybe Zoe at least or IZSME will be going, should be going, I should say. So yes, good point, Kev. But the whole point of IZSME and SMU and Zoe is to bring more to ZOS, really, to bring more back, more of the functions to Z or ZOS or Z Linux or ZCX. It's because we have multiple customers who actually do not want to run things on distributed boxes because they have no control over those or in the cloud. Right, those they sometimes lose connections or the firewalls go up and so on. So bringing it closer to the source, closer to the monitors, is you're breaking that that issue, or at least trying to mitigate against it.
anyone else?
Come on, Pat. I saw you on. I think that's good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, then in that case we can terminate the session just a little early. and hopefully I'll see a lot of you back at the next session, which is another Zoe conversation. Okay. So thank you very much for attending. Please remember to provide feedback, and see you at the next session.